Hey guys, what's up? So, something that I don't see many people talk about is the importance of varnishing your straight builds. Now, for most of us who build gunpla, generally we just do a straight build out of the box and then just leave it. Because usually they're fine. Now, of course, unless it's like a competition piece or something along those lines, you're rarely never going to take any kind of spray cans or anything for this. So, what I want to talk about though is the importance of why you need to varnish your model. It's important to do since it does help with a few things. Now, here we have one of the RX-78 entry grade variants, and I have matte varnished this entire kit. What I used for this was the first thing we're going to talk about, Mr. Super Clear Matte. This is probably the most common and easy to work with matte varnish you can buy on the market. It's in a spray can. They usually retail for like $12 a can. It's nice. Stuff goes on smooth. It lays out perfectly fine. It is one of the best matte varnishes on the market. Now, it's simple to do with entry grades and high grades. All you do is take this, give it a quick shake, put them on something that rotates. To me, it makes a spray stand that you can use. Put him on it, spin it around, just spray him from like 4 to 6 inches away, short bursts. Once it dries, it's perfect. It's a smooth, clear matte finish. It's beautiful varnish. It goes on super smooth. It dries super smooth. The nice thing is though is that it's not super dull either. So it does have just a tiny kind of satiny shine right there on the top of the foot, and in some of these other areas it would have been really glossy plastic. And this is my recommendation through and through, especially if you're a newcomer to the hobby. This stuff is perfect. This is exactly what you should probably finish all your kits with. But this isn't always the most viable option, especially since if you live in a state or a country where you get a lot of snow and a lot of bad weather, or your winters are very long, this is not a doable option since you need a clear, crisp day to work in it. Usually spring and early summer is really your only usable options for something like this. Now, while this is, if you live in the right environment, good, or you don't have access to a spray booth, but then there are other options. There is, if you're using certain chemical-based paints like some enamels and some lacquers, there's Testors Dullcote. This stuff's been around for 1,000 years. It's existed almost as long as scale modeling's existed as a hobby. But this stuff can be brushed on or sprayed on, either one. Either way, it's going to have a smell to it. It's going to have a weird, almost spray paintish type of smell. I'd recommend that if you're going to spray this, still wear a respirator and gloves, but also make sure you have ventilation to the outdoors. Even if you're going to brush this on, still crack a window or have a fan going so it doesn't accumulate in your area and you wind up passing out from vapor lock. But it's sort of a milky finish. And what you'll want to do is, of course, you'll want to shake this really good before you use it, and make sure that you have this where you can see a divide between bottle and varnish. I don't know how much showing up on screen, but every one of these usually has a safety seal on the inside. This one doesn't, but usually it's a little red safety seal. Took that off mostly for the ease of using it because I've been working with it. But there's a small little red safety seal about this big that pops in there and you'll have to pry out with something. They're not really needed, so you won't really need them, but it is a good option. But know that it is an option that does not smell the best, is not the healthiest thing in the world to be using without a respirator or gloves. And if you don't have access to an airbrush, or again, you really just don't have a very big hobby space, this is also probably not your best option. Now we move into the water-based options that generally are probably a smarter option, especially if you live in a small area or you live alone. Tamiya makes a couple of options that are all lacquer-based. These are Vallejo's varnishes. We have a satin, a matte, and a gloss. I didn't bother getting the gloss because we're not talking about gloss varnishing here. That's in another video. The satin varnish and the matte varnish are thick. They are thick-bodied, water-based acrylics. You can brush paint these on, no problem. You don't need a respirator. They dry smooth. That's what he's done with, is the matte varnish from Vallejo. This is airbrushed on, of course, which is only because I have an airbrush and it's a viable option. But again, it's not super, super flat. It doesn't give a dead flat look. It does give a little bit of a shine, which is perfectly fine. What I definitely enjoy about this is that it's easy to work with. I myself always recommend this to people when they're talking about getting a good water-based acrylic varnish. Vallejo's usually the way to go. It's foolproof. It works great. It goes on great. It's a nice product in general. Most of their products are really nice. I don't get what the hate towards some Vallejo products is. I've never had a problem with them. They're one of my go-to paint brands, especially with their varnishes and some of their more odds and ends like plastic cement and things like that. Now, of course, this is for your straight builds, I was thinking. The reason you probably want to do this for your straight builds, it just adds a sense of realism to them. To the corner of my desk here, I've got a high grade that has no varnish added to him. You can see he's very plasticky and kind of toyetic. Which, in a way, that's fine if that's what you're going for, look-wise. If you want your high grades to, be plasticky and kind of toyetic, which is not a problem. But you also run into the issue of, then if you've done any paint work or you've done any kind of custom decal work or anything like that, it's not going to hold up as well because there's no protective layer between it. Especially on things like these entry grades and some of these build high grades like this. You have a lot of stickers and a lot of, like these are stickers, this is a sticker, and even the stripe on the leg is a sticker, the garter belt sticker as I call it. I had to gloss varnish, I had to matte and varnish this kit because if I didn't, these would have been peeling up by now because putting a sticker over a bare plastic kit doesn't generally hold up the best. Now, one of the reasons I had to Dullcoat this kit was simple. I did some weathering on some of the vents. I did some weathering on some of the shin guards, around parts of the hips. I wanted to, this is also one of my favorite high grades ever. This is the Command Quanti from, I think it's Build Diver or Build Fighter. Anyway, great to see the Command Gundam finally getting a high grade, even if it is the wrong base suit to use for it, not the full armor RX-78, but it doesn't matter. Still a super cool kit. So, a little bit of weathering here at the feet and things like that. And I wanted to protect all that and also knock the shine down because it doesn't make sense for a military war machine really to be bright, shiny, and plasticky looking. But then you fall into the other half where, say, your custom builds or your tournament pieces like this. He was hit with a satin varnish after a lot of work like oil blending and enamel was used because he's a competition piece and I wanted to be able to have everything I could, get the weathering right, get all the sort of looks I needed there to be there. And of course, varnishing him really adds to the aesthetic of what he is. Generally, when you are picking out what varnish you need for your project, remember, Varnish is a little less egregious than paint or primer, or even thinner. Generally with thinner, you want to buy a thinner that matches the paint you're using. If you're using Tester's paint, you'll buy Tester's thinners. If you're using Tamiya, you use Tamiya thinners, and vice versa. With your finishes and your varnishes specifically, it doesn't really matter what you use necessarily, so long as you remember what the base you're using is. If they are like this and they're bare plastic kits, or they're bare plastic kits with a little bit of Tamiya Weathering Master and spots, or some weathering pencils used in a few spots, you can use any form of Dullcoat you want because it's not going to affect them. Whereas if you're doing a custom painted project, you have to remember what you're using. Since my custom painted Death Scythe was using a lot of enamel, oil, and chemical based acrylics like Mr. Hobby and Tamiya, I had to opt for using chemical based dull coats like Tester's Dullcote. I had to use almost a whole bottle of this between sessions since that was painted in sections. I would have just used something like matte varnish, but again, when you put a water-based product over any kind of chemical base that it's not designed to work with, you risk having cracking, bubbling, peeling, fading, kind of your hazy looks on some stuff. And it's not ideal. So what I always recommend is when you do a straight build, any varnish is fine. When you do a painted build, think of what the majority of the paints you've used on the kit are and make your decision from there. Hopefully this has helped you guys going forward. One of the other beneficiaries of using a Dullcote is that it does help tighten some looser joints and makes the kit's rigidity a little bit better. This is not much of a problem now with modern high grades, but for some of your older high grades, you do kind of need that. Hopefully, this helped you guys make some informed hobby decisions and helps you guys, moving forward, decide if you do or don't want to varnish your kits. And if you do, hopefully I helped you figure out what to use and helped you guys figure out how to make your kits just look a little bit nicer on the shelves. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next one.